Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar called What's Loyalty Got to Do with It? I'm Richard Roppa, and I am here with my co-presenter, Laura Wooten from Wooten Communications. Laura, would you like to give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Laura Wooten. I teach marketing with Richard Roppa, and I am a marketer here in the Dallas area. One of my specialties is helping people get started on their marketing. So helping them create a plan, helping them figure out what their first and second and third steps should be, and keeping them accountable for that.
Excellent. And I'm Richard Roppa with Quasar Cowboy Consulting, also a co-presenter for Marketing with StacyK Academy, which gets started this Thursday, the 1st. And we hope that you will be able to join us in our marketing class. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Laura, I'm going to switch to the next slide and let you get started.
Great. Well, today we want to talk about customer loyalty, and we wanted to set the stage for why customer loyalty is important. And so we have a couple quotes. The first one says, increasing client loyalty by reducing client defection by just 5% boosts your profits by 25 to 80%. Okay, so what does that mean? That means keeping the clients you've got helps them grow the revenue with you so that you can have a more profitable practice. It's much cheaper to keep the clients you've got than it is to get new ones. And those clients tend to be longer term, more profitable clients.
And that's an amazing statistic when you think about it. Reducing defection by just 5% can increase profits by up to 80%. That really means that the clients that you have, if you continue to do more and more work with them, will really help boost the profitability of your company.
The second quote from Forbes says that 90% of clients who love a company will buy from them again, but only 30% of clients who like a company will buy from them again. Okay, so really breaking that down means we really need to work on getting our clients to love us and specifically getting the clients we already love to love us. And that's really what our presentation is about today, about how to build that client love between yourself and your clients.
Excellent. So let's jump right in. So let's start with, obviously, step one.
Step one really goes back to knowing who you want to work with. It's much easier to love the clients, for your clients to love you if you love them, right? And if you're doing services for them that you like doing and that you want to do, and they're the type. She talks about this in week 1 of Build Your Kick-Ass Practice. She talks about finding your jam. What kind of people do you want to work with? Who are they? What industry are they in? What services do you want to provide? That's essential to really getting your clients to love you. Next, you really need to listen to your gut. Have you ever taken a client that you're just like, oh my gosh, I know this client's going to be a pain, but I need some revenue, I need some more clients in, so I better go ahead and take them. Nope. That painful client is not a good idea. If your gut says this is not a good choice, don't take the client, all right? And then step 3, Stacy talks a lot about in Build Your Kick-Ass Practice as well, is date before you marry. That means, what can you do before you decide you really want to work long-term with a client? What kind of service can you provide? Maybe you can do a quick review for them, as she teaches in Build Your Kick-Ass Practice, or maybe you want to do a training session with them or some of their staff. Then you have an idea of how their books are set up. You get an idea of what kinds of people they are to work with. Find a way that you can kind of get a real feel for a client before you take them long term. That way you're going to step into it with eyes wide open and ensure you do like working with them. Another friend of mine, what they did is they do a trial period, and this is something you do sometimes when you hire people too. You say, okay, the first 3 months are going to be a trial period. There's no reason you can't do that when you're providing a service either. Just come back to the client and say, look, for the first 3 months, we're going to do this as a trial basis, and then we'll evaluate at the end of that time to make sure that we really both are getting the relationships working for both of us.
Exactly. And it's also knowing how the client defines value. Sounds like I've got a little bit of an echo. All right, Laura, let's move on to step 2.
All right, step 2 is establishing trust by providing value. So you provide that value unless you know what's going on. So how do you start establishing trust? The first thing, which is really obvious, is do what you said you're going to do, right? And do it well. If you said this is the services you're going to provide, make sure you do that. If you don't do it, own up to it. Like if something happens and you've made a mistake, make sure you admit that mistake and figure out how you're going to rectify it. Next, be responsive, be flexible, but within the parameters of your boundaries. Communicate. So if you communicate up front how you want to work with the client and follow that way, then they're going to be more likely to be understanding and get how you want to work together. So making sure that you stay true to your own values and you have the same process with clients is an important way of establishing trust with them. Next, you want to talk to them, really, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slide as well, but you want to talk to them and be a resource from them. You want to share expertise, give referrals, get to know them, become their trusted advisors. Say you want to, and when I say talk to them, I mean talk to them outside of the parameters of the project you're working on. Touch base with them, see what's going on. This is a great way for you to continue to add value. You can call them up and maybe just say, hey, I'm checking in. I wanted to see what's going on in your business and what's going on with you. And you might learn all kinds of stuff. Maybe you learn they've hired 4 new people and they need some additional payroll services and they didn't know you even offered those. Maybe you call them and you find out they're thinking about they need an attorney for some reason, and you happen to have some resources for them that may be helpful. If you can't add value if you don't know what's going on. So that is really the key, is by figuring out how often and talking to them.
Absolutely. And one of my favorites is just become their go-to person, their trusted advisor, because you can't add value if you don't know what's going on. So that brings us right down to step number 3.
Which is the easiest step, really, is to repeat, right? So all you have to do is continue to repeat. Our goal in SmartMarketing and in this webinar and everything we do is to keep this all very simple for you. We don't want to make a complex processes that drive you crazy. We want to keep it easy. So you need to stay in touch. There's lots of ways to do this. One would be social media. Make sure that you're connected with them on the avenues that you want to be, Facebook, LinkedIn, if you use Twitter, whatever it is, and comment on the things they comment on, what they put out there. Sincerely comment, though, don't just be goofball, but put something out there. Again, find a reason to make an occasional call to see what's going on with them. Recognize their birthdays, their anniversaries, their community involvement. We have a client that does a lot with Habitat for Humanity. It may make sense for us to send a donation maybe to Habitat for Humanity, or maybe to check in after the event happens that she's involved with and check in and see how it went. Know that there's a relationship. Building that relationship by knowing what's going on with folks is really what we're after here.
Well, one of the best things that I ever implemented in my practice, and frankly in other companies that I've worked at, is the 90-day check-in. I like to check in with clients every 90 days, Laura. And what I've found that happens is clients, sometimes if I called on day 94, they were like, Richard, you're 4 days late. And I started recognizing that I was actually training my clients to recognize that I would be giving them a call every 3 months. They started keeping lists of what they needed to talk to me about. And sometimes they even had orders where they would be ordering software and they were just holding them until I gave them a call. So anytime that you can put a process in place like a 90-day reach out and let them know that it's happening, they're going to really appreciate it. And then as you start doing that as a pattern, they're going to appreciate it even more. So All this is great. It all boils down to what happens next, which is a community of loyal clients. Laura?
So this is where this community of loyal clients is what you're trying to build. That is where you can begin introducing them to one another as well, and they can become a resource to one another, if that makes sense, right? If that makes sense. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during the case studies. I think, Richard, you've had great success with introducing your clients to one another.
I love introducing them because, you know, I have a niche that I work with, and that is bookkeepers and accountants. And oftentimes I'll find that one will specialize in e-commerce, another will specialize in service work for QuickBooks. That service work for QuickBooks person will need an e-commerce person. And I have a great amount of ability to introduce the two and let them start working together. It helps them, it helps everybody involved in the process, and they really look at me as a trusted advisor when we do that.
Great. So now we're going to move into our case studies and talk a little bit more about how to actually apply some of these processes.
Absolutely. So Harley Davidson, I know you're thinking, Harley Davidson, they're huge. How does this apply to me? There's a lot that we can learn from the big boys. So let's back up in time and talk about Harley for just a moment. So in the 80s, they were flat broke. They were on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. In the 90s, they switched that around. They were actually a market leader in selling motorcycles across the country. In the 2000s, they had over 150,000 Harley owners drive across the country to meet in Milwaukee for a meetup group. Now, again, all of this, how does this apply to me? Well, Laura is going to tell you exactly how this applies to you and your small business.
Great. So what Harley Davidson did was not focus on market share or acquisition. They focused on developing a loyal client base. They knew the value of the loyal client, and they knew it was so step one was really figuring out who those clients were, right? So they're a big company. They're off in the world, you know, by themselves, sometimes working in a little bit of a vacuum as opposed to the people on the retail front selling the motorcycles. So they really had to figure out who were their clients. And they found they weren't who the stereotypical motorcycle driver had been. They weren't the bearded, tattooed, scary guys. They were really middle to upper class, who made over $75,000. They were folks next door, the folks that you live next door. In fact, my daughter's preschool teacher and her husband were Harley drivers, and she was like this little preschool teacher. They were the hobbyists who liked grown-up toys. So that's why we say to really know your jam, right? You need to know who it is that really gets value from working with you and who you really enjoy working with, because that's going to be step one in really understanding how to begin to start applying some of these things. Next, you want to establish trust by providing value, right? We talked about that in step two. For Harley Davidson, that meant create a desirable brand. They did that in a couple ways. One, they created some really cool branded materials. They had hats and t-shirts. They became kind of a club. And that was an important way for people to express their identity as Harley owners. Step three was that establishing that community. They created the Harley Owners Group. You might have heard of the Hogs. In the 80s, back when Harley wasn't doing that great, they had only 28 members. In the 90s, it grew to 325,000 members. And what they did was they extended the brand beyond the bike, right? It's not just about riding a motorcycle. It's around a lifestyle. They turned Harley Davidson into a way of living. Hey, we love being out on the weekends on our bikes. We love hanging out with other bike riders. We love, I guess they call them bikes. I'm not a hog member myself, so I'm not sure whether they call them bikes or not. So while we're not expecting you to sell hats and t-shirts and to create a 325,000 person meetup group, there's a lot of lessons we can learn from Harley Davidson to if we follow the steps that we talked about.
Now let's bring it back down to a smaller example that's more in tune and more in line with the people that are on this webinar today. So we want to bring you to a case study that happens to be very personal to Laura. It's her mortgage broker.
Well, I'll clarify that actually. I've never actually used him as a mortgage broker, but he is a mortgage broker in the Dallas area. I met him several years ago at a fundraising event I attended and sat next to him and just chatted with him. We were thinking about selling our house at the time, so mortgages were of interest to me, but they're not frequently, right? So he really needs, like, how many of us need to buy a house that often? Maybe you guys do, but I'm kind of cheap. I tend to not buy a house once or twice a lifetime, it seems. So, so he needs a lot of referrals. He needs folks that can refer him to others. What he's done that's been so brilliant is he stayed in touch with me. Even though I've never used his services, every year he calls me on my birthday. I know I'm going to get a call that day from Jarrett. He calls, I answer the phone. He's, Laura, how's it going? I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. It's a very short conversation, but I know he's thinking of me. And that way I can think of him if I know somebody buying a house that needs a mortgage broker. Next thing he does that's really great is he does an annual event at the Dallas Zoo. He does a customer appreciation day, and he includes folks like me who've never actually used his services in this customer appreciation day. He brings them together. The zoo is a perfect avenue for him because families live in houses. It's a family kind of event. People are like, hey, yeah, I need an excuse to go to the zoo, take my kids. They can also get together, have a little FaceTime with him, go off and do their fun zoo stuff, meet some other of his clients or prospects, so it becomes a networking opportunity as well for them. And it's just a great way for him to stay in touch with folks. He's also a big funder of the zoo. He's a donor to the zoo and like a volunteer at the zoo. So it also shows where his values lie. And really, he's doing a lot of things to stay in touch that they're not time consuming. I don't hear from him a ton other than that, but I remember him and I hope to be able to refer him because I just feel so good about him. You know, he makes me feel good, and he's created this great community of folks that might need a mortgage.
And Laura, you just said something very beautiful there. Exactly what he's trying to do is to get referrals. You remember him. If you know somebody that needs a mortgage, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Think of Jarrett.
Yeah. And give those people his phone number and have them call. So that leaves us with your challenge, which is creating a customer loyalty plan.
It doesn't have to be complicated. I know Richard talk about your little books strategy.
So I had a client a couple of weeks ago. We're talking. She had expressed an interest, and I had just read a book that was very much in line with what she was talking about. So I sent her a copy of the book, and I said, let's read this. Let's read this together. And we now are getting together and talking about the book. And as we're talking about the book, believe it or not, new business has come up out of that conversation, all because of a $12 little book that was very timely, that had something to do with what we were talking about, but didn't necessarily have to do with anything we were talking about with regards to the work that we were doing together. So sometimes it's the littlest things that will create loyalty, and sometimes it's much bigger things. So think about how you can go about creating some additional customer loyalty, whether it be the every 90-day check-in, whether it be a little gift book, whether it be a meetup group at your office, maybe an open house at your office, but anything that you can do to create new and additional customer loyalty.
You can do it. We have a client, we have somebody that took our marketing class in the spring. She does a coffee chats on the phone or on Zoom easily, inexpensively, she sends a $5 gift card to folks via Starbucks and says, hey, I'd love to have you for coffee. That way they could be anywhere in the country. She schedules time. She uses Zoom or Skype or something so she can have FaceTime and actually see them, and spends 20 to 30 minutes just getting to know them and checking in. She uses this as also a business development strategy. It doesn't always have to be a customer loyalty plan, but I would say if you focus on your customers first, the customers you already have that already care about you, you're going to automatically grow your business because they're going to begin to refer you and think of you more frequently because of the work that you're doing with them.
All right, so that concludes our webinar today. We hope that you will think about joining us in our Smart class. Marketing is smarter marketing, smarter sales. And we put that together and combined it into a 6-week course called Smarketing, which does start on September 1. You can get more information by going to www.StacyKacademy.com. And we want to thank you for joining us on this webinar today.
Thank you, guys. We'd love to have you.